It's not always about being really like off the cuff. You can be very strategic in your catalytic firecracker energy as well in terms of planning and execution. Because let's be real, it's 2026 when we're recording this. People who are not AI enabled, at least if you're working in an organizational context, are being left behind. And I think our clients in team coaching engagements are really struggling with what is going to create that maximum boldness. Things are changing dramatically in a lot of different spaces, especially in organizational contexts. And so the catalytic energy might be something that's needed on the part of your clients to challenge, to provoke, to prompt people to really shift and name assumptions, because the changes, we've never seen changes like this before. And I think always being on the front end of change, it's really interesting to see people who aren't even seeing what is happening right now. And that can mean make it or break it for a lot of things, including a lot of teams that are changing shape, like literally every week. Hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, and welcome to the Coaching Money Podcast. I've been on a mission for the last 20 years to expand the coaching conversation to many. Along with my co-host, Evana Valle, we're going to be exploring coaching as it relates to conversations, connection, and change in both personal and professional settings. Coaching Money is about creating empowering and thought-provoking spaces for conversation which strengthen relationships and enhance results. Throughout the Coaching Money podcast, we'll share tools, practices, and approaches to support you in your conversations, one dialogue at a time. So, Evana, welcome back. We're on our 5th of the 5 coaching superpowers. And today we're going to look at the catalytic firecracker. When you think catalytic firecracker, what's important for you to note? What do you think about?
For me, it's all around that provocateur energy and like really listening for where the energy wants to get activated to ignite, and whether that's with a powerful question. And I'll say this continues to be my growth edge. This is the one that really has me excited, but also terrified, if I can say so. But it is so important for action and momentum. And that's what's coming to mind when I think about catalytic firecracker.
Yeah, I think the provocateur is definitely a piece of this. It is about being bold and helping people move really into their stretch zones. It's about affecting change. It's about taking a stand. And it's also about planning. You know, there's multiple layers to the coaching. The catalytic firecracker superpower that is not unilateral. And I hope if people have listened to our last 4 episodes of the other group and team coaching superpowers, that they're going to notice that there's multiple layers here, which we hope really will give you some insights into the what, the why, and how you might activate more firepower, literally, with your own coaching. So why don't we dive right in? And you know, catalytic firecracker, I want to break this down for a minute, because to catalyze something means bringing 2 things together to create more force. And there is a different energy required for coaching many, I would say. One-on-one, we're calibrating all the time. It's a very deep relationship. But now when we're in a room with more than one person, the energy may feel really different on the part of the coach. What do you notice in your work with groups that you work with in terms of needing a little bit more, quote unquote, firepower or energy?
You say it so beautifully. And even as I think and reflect on some of the groups that I've been working with, the dynamic of the group, or we can say the system, right? Like there's different energy that comes into the dynamic. And as the coach, I often find myself really being mindful of the individual energy, but really also that macro energy and where what needs to be honored or what needs to be named or what needs to be said or activated in the bigger realm, and trusting that whatever that action is or that momentum is and the pace that it is for everyone, everyone will get something from it. But we can't go down the rabbit hole of keeping things slow, whether it be because that's our comfort, my own comfort zone, or even because we feel that the group dynamic is not all ready to go. Like that's maybe that's the perfect time, depending on what's in the space.
Yeah. And again,
Yeah.
with all of these, we want to be activating them in different moments and different times. I think it's unlikely that we're always going to show up as a catalytic firecracker, because I think some people like, but what should I push? But, sometimes we do need to provoke. We do need to step into that provocateur role in order to challenge, in order to be bold. And this is an area that I think is a growth edge for many coaches, just like the grounded labyrinth, maybe for others, because they can be seen as a bit of a polar opposite. It's really interesting to see people who aren't even seeing what is happening right now. And that can mean make it or break it for a lot of things, including a lot of teams that are changing shape, like literally every week. So that's a pretty interesting area. Again, as coaches, we have choice. We want to know what is going to meet us. Who do we partner with? I think there can be a lack of comfort in this area of the provocateur. So do you have to do it, or do you partner with someone who can bring that? And that might be an
Very
interesting
true.
question as well, because part of the idea of developing this framework, almost 5 years ago now, in fact, it is 5 years, is this notion of we don't have to do it all, but we do need to bring it all. And so if we're not bringing it, is there someone else in the group? Or if we're co-coaching, is it something that our partner is bringing to the table? So what do you think about that? When you think about the range?
Yeah, lots of richness here, because what I'm hearing and what you're saying is, there's different doorways to access this provocateur, whether it be with a co-coach and that range. I'm also hearing, though, what I heard for myself in that is also, how am I showing up as the coach, bringing it all? Because the provocateur, and I'm thinking about the competencies, even around challenging our own biases, trusting that the group and the individuals in the group they're naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. And so sometimes the provocateur is not necessarily this massive thing, but maybe it's even an invitation of a reframe, or identifying a limiting belief, naming the limiting belief, and being unattached as being the consultant and the teacher who knows the answer, and just to be able to ignite that reframe, that shift, or I'm going to use the word awakening, but it's not even that, like that, hold on a sec, like what?
Yeah.
And I see this in the practicum program. I see this in my own self. I see it in groups where we hold ourselves back. And when we hold ourselves back, we're actually holding the people in our conversations back.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of ego check and what is of service to the group. What is needed in this conversation? And I don't know what your thoughts on this is when we're thinking about a group and it's forming and storming, naming, allowing that to be named. And a lot of people tend to be very reserved in the sense of wanting to not ruffle feathers, wanting to keep peace. And it's not about not having trust, safety, and connection, because that is still fundamental.
Yes.
It's fundamental. And we can go down that conversation of how that is fundamental in order for any of these 5 activations to be valuable and of service. But when I'm thinking about the catalytic firecracker specifically, we really need to check in with ourselves and asking ourselves, where are we holding ourselves back in service of the group? Because I think that's an underlying piece below the waterline. Our beliefs, our mindsets, even as a coach, especially for those who have been coming from facilitation and training, where they're the experts and they're really, to hold on, I'm just going to put that out there. I'm going to throw the spaghetti on the wall. That's how I used to say it as an early coach to clients. I'm going to throw the spaghetti on the wall, and it might stick and it might not, but I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you just said, how are we influencing the experience of the group or the team that we're working with? If we are unable to go into certain areas, then that is actually at the detraction of the people that we're serving. And so, as much as we say, the grounded labyrinth is about going deep, the catalytic firecracker is about going broad and high. And I think high can be positive, but high can also be negative, right? We need to work with both the positive and the negative in the whole human experience, which is becoming even more important in today's world of AI. We can't always be in the midpoint. And so are we stretching to both realms in terms of creating a bit of boldness, a bit of the provocation, which is not comfortable? I think, again, this requires that we examine our own belief systems and our own insights of what is the role of the coach.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting one. In times of change, what is the role of the coach? And I've been putting this out a lot in supervision, in mentor coaching. What do you see as your role in times of change? Are you absolutely neutral? Can you afford to be absolutely neutral? Is coaching the best modality in times of change? So there's a lot of very interesting questions, I think, wrapped up in all of this, whether we are catalytic firecracker, whether we're spiral lighthouse, what is really the role of the coach, which is beyond our conversation today. But
Yeah.
I hope that people are getting a sense of the power, and with the power comes a responsibility as well, right? We don't just do this blindly, but what needs to be in place? And you pointed to the trust, safety, and connection. Is there enough trust, safety, and connection? What is the comfort zone, right? Like, we don't want to take people outside of their stretch zone, but we do want to make sure that we're not really just playing it safe. Otherwise, there's no value to coaching, right?
Yeah. I want to name something, if I may. I don't want it to be understood that, like, I'm not, at least, and I won't speak for you, but I'm not suggesting that. I think you said it really well. Like, we're not bringing catalytic firecracker energy for the whole session. It's around when catalytic coaches interrupt a group. It's rarely random. They're sensing, like, that's our coaching presence. They're sensing that exact momentum is possible for that firecracker, whether it be broad and high. It's really important. Like, this is that intentionality, and it does require our listening. It does require our own awareness. It does require us checking our own biases.
Yes.
So we are always in service of the group and unattached to being right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we don't know what will get catalyzed as well, right? We just
Yeah.
don't know. And every group, it can be a different experience. Every team, it can be a different experience. And really solid point here, we need to make sure that there is enough trust, because this can backfire as well. So again, to intentionality and responsibility, how do we ensure that this is adding value at the right time, that people are ready and able to go into those spaces? Because even for a team, a question like, what's taboo? What aren't you talking about? Can not have the impact that is intended. So we do want to really be careful with this. And I would say for a lot of coaches, they may play it on the side of, oh, I'm just going to be. Well, what opportunity is being lost there, right? How might individuals in a group or the collective in a team be able to move differently, move higher, broader, wider, at a greater span, if you do provoke a little bit more? So we'll leave that with you, because again, it is an opportunity for us to do things. And I guess let's get specific on what can we do? What does it look like, sound like, with the activation of the catalytic firecracker. So for me, I just mentioned this question of like, what's taboo? What are you not looking at? There's such power in the contrast of life. And contrast is my word for 2026, right? Like,
Mhm.
I probably take it to the max for a lot of people, but it's just like that. It is in those edges that I think life is importantly lived in an era, again, in an era of AI. Like AI can do so much, but what is the real human addition in today's world? I think that is the space of creativity and innovation. And that's not a comfortable area, right? When we innovate, that is an area of mess. It's an area of conflict. It's an area of friction. It's an area of contrast. And so, as a coach,
Uncertainty.
yeah, total uncertainty. And so, as coaches, how are we with playing in that space? We can't bring in energy if we're not comfortable in playing in that energy.
Yeah. The word that I'm hearing for myself and all that you're saying is that attachment to the outcome, right?
Mhm.
That creativity, that innovation. Even with the work that I'm doing in Italy right now, like I'm really trying to iterate. I've had a year of some fairly solid ground building in my work. And now I'm really trying to say, okay, how do I systematize this? And I got to tell you, it is really uncomfortable. All my conversations, I'm not gonna call them sales conversations, all my conversations are in Italian, and
Mm.
I am not bilingual by any stretch. And so, so I say that not to ask as a reflective question, like, where are you uncomfortable, and where is your uncomfortability keeping you safe?
Mhm.
You know, because safety is important, but also like limiting that next step, that next iteration, and I'm
Mhm.
talking about it from a business standpoint, but I'm going to invite you to think about it in the context of your own conversations in your groups, in your teams, at your kitchen table, whatever that is. We need a foundation of safety. Absolutely. And growth doesn't happen there.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't happen there. It happens in action, which is what Catalytic Firecracker values. The catalytic firecracker values action, and
Yeah.
transformation and growth doesn't happen in just staying in the safe zone. We need to create a safe zone. We need to know what that edge is
Mhm.
and continuously moving in that edge. And for me, it really is around continuing to ground in who I am and what I stand for,
Mhm.
and going, okay, this is who I am and this is this is what I stand for. And that means, okay, what is that next edge that I can honor that, but still continue to grow, to be of service, to evolve?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting as I hear you say that it is the edgy work. There's also a piece of what if you don't, right? Why not? Again, back to that contrast of what if.
Yeah.
And I think if we make this really specific, like what does this look like within the work? A catalytic firecracker conversation might be opposite of grounded labyrinth. Grounded labyrinth might be reflective pause. It might be going out and walking a labyrinth, but the catalytic firecracker might be like climbing a mountain, right? It might be going on White River rafting. It might also, as we're seeing, and we're almost at the end of this year's sprints, but the 26 for 26 days of a minimum of 26 minutes of virtual co-working. This year, we've been averaging about 39 minutes. And what is interesting
Mm.
is people sit down to their creative projects, which 6 weeks ago they were unformed. Today, as we have about 9 days left of the sprint, they're formed, they're ideas. And even so, in the action of being in action, we hit resistance, right? If we're in a
Mm.
creative process, we hit resistance. And I've been doing this long enough as a writer, as a creator, as a coach of creators and authors to see that there's a point at which it all dissolves, right? You hit the wall, but you're not always going to be hitting the wall. That wall will dissolve, it will explode, it may implode. But that other side of the creativity is where the
Right.
gold is where like things really come together. And I've been seeing that and hearing that in this year's sprints
Mm.
consistently. And it's hard. It's a hard context for people to be creative. It's a hard context for people to be in the catalytic firecracker energy for longer periods because we are living in such an era and a moment of disruption. And so again, this is important energy, but it may not be the only energy. It may not be
Absolutely.
in massive bursts. It may just be strategically activated for the groups, the teams, the individuals that you're working with. So I want to just share that as well, because I think some people might be listening going, oh yeah, that's nice. And like the world is on fire. Like, why would I add any more fire to the fire? Sometimes it's important to do that. There's different layers. There's a different types of fire as well that we can
Yeah.
activate.
Well, I think what I really appreciate that, because that really kind of slows this down for me, at least. This is really around, it is strategic or intentional, you know? And I think about, like, sometimes in my own groups, when a group keeps processing, but nothing changes,
Mm-hmm.
they're underactivated. And so, like, how am I listen, like, I'm thinking the mindfulness, how am I listening for that? What am I looking for? What am I tasting? What is the somatic? Because I'm very much really trying to connect to my body to get those cues, right? So it's like, okay, like, so we can't just be cerebral, and we have
No.
to help our participants also not only be cerebral. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to, because I'm doing more and more of my own work in this, is working with a regulated nervous system. Like, part of
Mm-hmm.
getting action, part of getting that momentum is that regulated nervous system. And part of that fits in that trust, safety, and connection. But like, how am I supporting myself to be regulated so then I can take that, whatever that contrast is? It doesn't always have to be go high, but
Mm-hmm.
what is that, like, what is, maybe the contrast is that inward movement, which is really that growth edge of the catalytic firecracker
Mm-hmm.
of the
Mm-hmm.
being.
Yes. Yeah. And to your point, like what is the space in which we want to go? If you watch a fireworks, right? There's multiple different types of fireworks that
Yeah,
take place, and they're all awe creating in their own way. Some are big,
totally.
some are bold, some are like the little ones, but they're vibrant. And I think
Yes.
that again is a piece of this that we want to appreciate. What is really needed?
Yeah.
What can you bring? What can the group bring as well? So there's a lot in this arena. And if we are, as a profession, as an industry, about transformation and change, this is a really important piece of the puzzle, along with the energy of the spiral lighthouse, the grounded labyrinth, the ecosystem connector,
Mm.
right? All of these are ones that we want to embody. And the intent of doing this whole series is to get you thinking about what are you using? What are you activating? What are you not activating in service to the people that we work with?
Always.
Yeah. And again,
And that,
it is always about selectivity, strategic, and not knowing what's going to come out the other end. So yeah, I think there's a lot here. What haven't we touched on in this space yet? There's one piece I feel we haven't really dove into yet. But is there anything from your perspective that you think we haven't touched on with catalytic firecracker?
I think I've sprinkled some salt, but for me, I think it is worth maybe taking a minute or two, is the triggers, like what
Mm.
activates the catalytic firecracker. Like, I touched on that, like that growing edge of being, because, especially in a world of change and chaos, like, yes, many of us need to turn the volume up. But what I love about these superpowers is that range and understanding and the agility and the fluidity that's needed moment by moment by moment,
Mm-hmm.
especially when, at least in my work, And even in my own, if I think about my own Italian, I feel like I need to be performing Italian when I'm having conversations. And
Mm,
I keep going, no, like I keep bringing my coaching skills of presence. I just have to be present. I have to be listening. I have to have my heart open. And so I think I think with the catalytic firecracker is, for me, it's I got to turn the volume up. But for those who really relate to that action, that provocateur, that go-getter,
yeah.
that initiator, is really okay, is how, like, that trigger of slow pace. And when you're the group maybe is so fast paced, and they actually need to slow down, and you need to slow down, and you need to go back into your toolbox and go, how can
Mhm.
I actually support that slowdown? So we're not just shooting fireworks for the sake of fireworks, and they're not actually lighting, and they're not having the impact that we
Mhm.
want them to have.
Yeah. Well, I've gone to the web to see what really is the definition of provocateur, right? And
Mhm.
so comes from the Latin root of provocare, which is to call forth. And I think that's a really, like, why are we stepping into this? What is the purpose? Because we don't want to just be controversial or challenging for that. That is reckless, but what is the point? And I think it's just a very interesting era that we live in where, in pop culture, you have books like Let Them, which again is the complete opposite of a provocateur. Again, to not incite for incitation's sense, but to really use it as an invitation to affect change.
Mm.
I feel we are very much at a moment where there's a lot of potential scenarios that could happen on the other side, but who is going to take a stand? And who's going to take a stand against the ones that have already taken a stand? And
Mhm.
that's a really interesting space to be looking at. But as coaches, again, growth doesn't just happen from a smooth trail. Pattern interruption is critical. How do we really activate that pattern interrupt to create contrast? And sometimes you might call it jolt, to really invite people to think about, whoa, what is at stake? What if I don't act? What is going to happen? So again, very, very much digs deeply into the importance of doing the work, not only the trust, safety, and connection, but values and vision and mission, the why.
Absolutely.
All of these have space, as I hope that people have seen as well from the different perspectives in
Mhm.
addition.
Yeah.
So I think the only piece we haven't touched on, and it's
Yeah.
interesting when I was creating this, I think there's also a piece of the catalytic firecracker that's very much about goals, right? Like
Mm.
really crystallized on goals. Maybe the go-getter is another frame. That's a bit of a different gradient energy of the
Mm.
catalytic firecracker. But they're not going to sit back. They may be the workhorse. They may be the one that just is a goal getter. And so I think it's interesting too if we look at perhaps the cyclical nature of what has been the world to this point. When is that go-getter energy good? When is it a detraction? But part of
Mm.
why we have been spending time on this is to help people calibrate, to say, when is it appropriate to turn up the volume on this? When might it not be appropriate or not in service to turn it up?
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanna breathe that in for a moment, there's a deeper thread in that.
Hmm.
There's a deeper thread in that, because what I'm I so appreciate the fact that you mentioned, and it's also values, and it's also vision, and it's also, because it really, to me, that really speaks to, like, that whole person, that whole self.
Hmm.
And so we're not at all, I'm not suggesting action for the purpose of action, but how does this action connect back to goals, vision, and how do we support that in happening?
Yeah.
And And, it happens through action. And sometimes, like, I love what you do you're such a beautiful model for me in your iteration in your work and how you
Mhm.
continuously like iterate and iterate. And I find myself doing that because it's in my action, it's in my conversations, it's in my marketing, it's in this, that clarity is actually coming, not only for them, but in who I want to be and
Mhm.
who I want to work with and who I can be of service to.
Yeah.
So when I look at this, like, it's like, yes, I have a goal of creating a sustainable Italian practice. Yes, yes, yes. But the action is what's actually going to help me get that
Mm.
through the iteration, through that. And I think that's the catalytic firecracker energy is like, okay, this is uncomfortable. This is edgy. This is, ooh, but I'm going to do this. Why? Because I have this vision with this goal, and I'm going to get clarity by putting myself out there, by
Yeah.
asking that provocative question, by naming the elephant in the room in a group coaching gig
Mhm.
or a team coaching gig,
Yeah.
or by reframing something. If someone has a set belief on something and you invite them as a reframe on a belief, and just not because they have to follow you, but to act as a firecracker, like, whoa.
Yeah. Again, we could continue going and going and going, but it is through the going that the learning really happens. And we hope that as you've been listening today, you've got some ideas not only on what this is, but how you might activate this more in your work, whether you're working with groups or you're working with teams. And it is grounded in that trust, safety, connection, and strong relationships, and intentionality, in, the mission, vision, values. And we want to invite you to, share your stories. How are you activating this? What impact has it had in the groups that you have worked with? Where might you not be activating it enough?
Yeah.
So we are getting to the end of this fifth of the 5 superpowers. And I think maybe next episode we'll do a bit of a reflect back, because chances are these were dropped out, or they were activated. What is the word? Yeah, dropped.
Yeah.
Podcasts get dropped. They were dropped over 2.5 months. And a lot may have happened in the 2.5 months since you listened to the first one of the group and team coaching superpowers. I know as I'm getting ready for our next offering of not only the superpowers, but also the hybrid work styles, it really makes me appreciate just how dynamic this work is and how different coaches can bring different energy. And I want to spotlight again, if this feels like a growth edge, it probably is a growth edge, and you don't have to do it alone. If you're team coaching, you're co-coaching. And so how might you really partner with people who are pulling you forward, who are helping you stretch your zones, whether it's even in the zone of the toolkit that you're bringing, because people need different things from us at different times. So I've really enjoyed this series. What about you, Evana, as we sort of go to wrap up Catalytic Firecracker? Any reflections on this entire series over the last few months?
It's been really enjoyable and grounding to anchor in some of these. And for me, I like the idea of coming back and wrapping it up the next episode.
Mhm.
But I just think it's like, you know what, like this is not going from 1 to 10. Like this is not about developing 5 strengths. This is about having presence, listening, honoring, honoring self, honoring the group to really be with what's here and what's going to support them. Because I think if we're coaches and whether we're a new coach or a seasoned coach, we're in this profession for a reason. And that is to really support growth, support evolution, support, possibility. And that starts with us. And these 5 superpowers are doorways to activate ourselves, but also activate what we stand for as coaches.
Absolutely. We'll come back and do another episode. If you haven't listened to any of the other episodes that came before this one, definitely check them out. Again, you'll listen to the ecosystem connector, grounded labyrinth, the spiral lighthouse, and Thank you. And we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Ciao.